I'm your host, Brandy Fleck, and this is Human Amplified. We're on a mission to revamp society by amplifying your humanity. This week on the show,
I'm Dustin Rochester. I always knew that the weight was a barrier. It's usually what's hiding in the dark that is what's going to really drive any change. I had to confront a lot of demons. The stress of me not being aligned with the things that I had an underlying passion for. But I found out that I was able to do a lot more than I thought I could. The value of myself to me, there's always more gas in the tank.
This episode is about turning mental and physical challenges into not only a full body transformation, but a whole human transformation, and what made that transformation possible from the ground up. Guest Dustin Rochester, a dad and healthcare IT consultant from Williamston, South Carolina, opens up about losing 130 pounds in a year from 2019 to 2020. He tells us what it was like at his heaviest and what his wake-up calls were. One was personal and one professional, and those sparked his motivation to change. Dustin tells us about how he had to get tough on himself and also gives us the exact tangible steps he took to lose the weight, start getting more physically active, and find and embrace an activity, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that is aligned with his passion. Specifically, we talk about the Keto diet, adapting a diet as physical needs change, and learning lessons about success through momentum, goals, and a healthy relationship with food and yourself. We compare Dustin's old self-care routine to his new one that he's grown into now, and dive into how clear self-worth has translated into a healthier lifestyle and better relationships. This wasn't an easy or fast journey for Dustin, which he's still on in many ways. It took a lot of hard work, determination, and even soul-searching. A key takeaway is that losing physical weight isn't just about losing physical weight. For Dustin, it was also about managing stress, changing habits, and finding parts of himself and befriending those parts so what was on the inside could surface. Hey guys, go to humanamplified.com and scroll down to the bottom to sign up for our weekly newsletter so you don't miss a thing coming out of this podcast. It also ensures you don't miss anything coming out of the blog or any general cool happenings around Human Amplified, as we're always developing new and cool content to help you be your best self. Plus, being on the email list gives you first dibs at any special offers, promos, big announcements, prize giveaways, new artwork, and more.
I'm Dustin Rochester. What I do professionally is I'm a healthcare IT consultant. I've been in IT now since 2005. I've done many jobs in IT along the way, from desktop support to engineering IT support to remote managed services to eventually getting into the healthcare side of it. I support the Epic EMR software. I did that at GHS Greenville Health System, which is now Prisma Health. Worked with them for 6 years. And then just this last year, early 2020, I moved into doing it as a consultant. I now work with an organization as a consultant / independent contractor,
Awesome.
and just really enjoy that line of work. Really enjoy being the support behind the scenes to provide healthcare workers with the tools they need.
Very cool.
As for me personally, I'm a father of 2 girls, both 16 and 14.
Okay.
Teenagers. Yay. I recently separated after a 13-year marriage. It's a bit of a tumultuous change there for a bit, but it's really kind of helped me find the path and direction that I'm heading down now, and just doing great overall as a result.
Good. Well, so do you like the path that you're on now?
I do. I was unsure about it at first, but it's become a bit clearer the more that I've walked on it, and just really been able to sort of solidify some joy that I didn't know that I was capable of.
Very cool. Okay. Let's jump into some rapid fire questions just real quick to get to know you a little
All
bit better.
right.
Favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Uh, Huge Star Wars fan. So if I had to pick one out of that, would have to be The Empire Strikes Back.
Okay. Favorite song?
Somebody to Love by Queen.
Awesome. How tall are you?
6'2".
Do you drive fast or slow?
Depends.
Okay.
If I'm on the highway fairly fast, it just depends.
Favorite place you've traveled to?
Probably have to be Grand Cayman. I stopped there on a cruise one time. Absolutely beautiful place. Beautiful clear waters. You can see the coral reefs down there. Really, really nice people. Just an awesome place to visit.
Awesome. Are you ocean or mountains?
Ocean.
I figured based on your last answer, but
I
thought I'd go there.
was gonna say I do love the mountains, but there's just something about the ocean that calls to me.
Yeah. Okay. Dogs or cats?
Uh, Probably dogs.
Okay.
I appreciate the warmth and the friendship from them. Cats are okay. They can be a little finicky sometimes.
All right. Well, let's jump in. You've alluded a little bit to the path that you're on now and what you've been through. And so let's dive into the weight loss journey part of it.
Okay.
You've definitely been on a weight loss journey. So can you give us sort of a before and after? Like, where did you start and where are you now with weight?
So at my heaviest, I was 370 pounds.
Okay.
At 370, I was absolutely miserable. I had problems doing just even the basics of things, leaning down to tie my shoes. Couldn't walk to the mailbox without getting winded.
Hmm.
Had some problem with just pressure with nerves. If I sat for a while, sides of my legs would start to go numb.
Mm.
It was just a terrible, miserable place to be. So that was May 2019 is when I got my heaviest.
Okay.
At my lowest, around May or June of 2020, I was down to around 240.
That's awesome.
So it's about 130 pounds there in about a year's time. Now, I have gained back some weight. I'm at 270 right now. Good portion of that's muscle. Since I've started doing the level of activity that I have, I've certainly put on some muscle.
Okay.
Some of it is not muscle. Some of it's a little water weight. Some of it's maybe a little bit of fat. I've had to adapt my diet just simply from all the activity that I do now.
Okay.
What I was doing before was great for weight loss, but not sustainable for an athlete level nutrition.
Yeah. And you are definitely an athlete at this point, I would say, especially if you're taking home gold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of hard work getting into this, and you definitely have to have the right type of nutrition to sustain it.
Okay. Can you give us some details on how you got to the point where you were at your heaviest and what factors played into that?
At the most basic level, stress. As we know, stress is probably the number one killer in the world at some point, whether it leads to, or exacerbates mental disease, whether it causes us to slip into unhealthy habits. It can cause so much damage to the body, so much damage to the mind. For me, while I do love what I do, my job does come with a lot of stress. It is a very high stress job, which I have now learned to manage it better than what I have been before. But there was also financial stress. There was the stress of my relationship, and another kind of stress that was more hidden to me at the time was the stress of me not being aligned with the things that I had an underlying passion for.
Wow. Okay. That's some big stuff.
Yeah, it adds up, absolutely adds up.
Yeah.
But from there, the stress exacerbated some of my underlying ADHD issues, and so to manage that, I ended up going a route of talk to my doctor. I couldn't manage at the time. So I went on a combination of Adderall and antidepressants
Okay.
to help me kind of manage my mental state. And while that gave me some temporary relief, it was really only masking the issues. It wasn't really helping me with anything. And now, don't get me wrong, I'm totally an advocate for getting the right mental care that somebody should. If somebody does need, assistance via medication, they should absolutely seek that.
Mhm.
It should also be coupled with working the underlying issues, though.
Agreed. Totally agreed. When you realized that the medication was just masking the issues, what did you do to address the underlying root of the problem?
The wake up call for me was I went to my doctor for a routine checkup. And I had already known that masking the issues caused my weight to balloon, started having some blood pressure issues. My mental state was a little better, but it was causing so many other trickle down effects.
Mhm.
And so went to my doctor. This was May of 2019, and I was having a bad day at the time, but the wake up call was when they took my blood pressure that day, and I was 170 over 110.
Okay.
They had to absolutely intervene that day with blood pressure medication and begin talking what we needed to do next steps to help me correct this.
At that point, when you were going to your doctor, or even right before you decided to go to the doctor to ask for help, did you have a self care routine of any kind? I know you said you weren't quite aligned with the things that you're passionate about, but did you do anything for self care?
Mhm. I had a very skewed perception at that time of what self care was that really added into my issues.
Okay.
One of the biggest things was I tried to align food with self-care and was eating for comfort. And as a lot of people know, when you get to that point where you're eating for comfort, it ends badly. It ends up creating a cycle that's really hard to manage. And when I would eat that way, I would immediately feel shame and frustration after that. But of course, being in the cycle that I was in, how would I cope with that? Eating more.
Mhm.
And just creates a terrible negative cycle. Also, dressed very slouchy, didn't take care of myself beyond kind of the minimum effort I needed to get by.
What I heard you say was that when you went to the doctor and your blood pressure was that high, that's what made you decide to change, correct? Or was there anything else that led to you deciding to change?
There was always a feeling that that something wasn't right. I wasn't doing something in my life that I needed to do to find joy, to find happiness. I just could never place my finger on it. I always knew that the weight was a barrier, but I never had the drive to break down that barrier. I knew I was just kind of in a rut of this is my life. This is what it is. This is the cards I've been dealt, and just that's what I got to roll with. But I also began even before that appointment, began thinking of my family, my kids,
Mm,
and wondering, will I still be around to see them have kids one day,
yeah.
to see those kids grow up. And I still felt so much shame, but not enough at that point to turn it into a drive. Not until I got the wake up call.
Okay. I don't know if this is an easy transition, but let's see if we can make this connection. So, I want to talk about self love for a minute.
Okay.
And I just want to put out there that, just because we're talking about weight loss as a way you started to care for yourself and take care of yourself and put yourself first, it doesn't mean that we're implying anyone with excess weight should feel bad about their body necessarily. But what are your thoughts on how to reconcile loving yourself the way you are while still wanting to make those changes to be healthier? Did you go through any of that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I went through some of it at the time, but also it's definitely something I've pondered on in hindsight as well.
Okay.
So I think biggest lessons learned then and biggest discoveries now on that are that you really have to understand what your worth is, what your value is to both yourself and to, the people that you love, your friends, your family, your coworkers. And I found that for me, that self-love often falters when you have a skewed understanding of what that worth and value is.
Okay.
I feel like once you kind of start aligning that, those pieces start to fall into place a bit better. And also, it forces you to hold yourself accountable for the stuff that is lacking.
Okay. This is really good stuff, Dustin. One follow-up question to that is, what is your worth? And the second one is, could you expand a little more on what's lacking that you need to hold yourself accountable for?
So, my worth, for one, is the investment in the quality of my relationships
Okay.
with definitely with my kids, but also with other people. I found that as all of this was happening, those relationships were weakening. I lost touch with a lot of people. The relationship between me and my daughters could have been better. And I discovered that I was allowing those elements or those issues to impede those relationships. And that putting focus on those relationships and understanding what I meant to the people in question made me understand the value of myself to me at the same time. And and that even went as far as work relationships. At my prior job, met a lot of great people, worked with a lot of great people. Even with the stress, it was one thing that did keep me going. Understanding that for quite a while, I had a very key role in the support of the organization
Mm.
and supported a lot of key critical infrastructure that was needed to just to keep things going and lives that were saved. And one other wake up call that I had from a pure professional standpoint was we had had a major update that didn't go as well as we had hoped. There was a lot of login issues and performance issues afterwards. And we heard a report that there was a patient on a table in a cardiac unit and that there were some complications in providing them care because of system performance issues and unable to access information at the time.
Okay.
And, that for me reinforced my worth and the focus that I needed to place on my job in order to try and hopefully make the items that I supported work the best that they could in order to provide them the tools to provide the care.
Wow. I got chills when you told that story. Oh my goodness. Okay. So when you talk about your job coming with stress, I mean, the stress of supporting life-saving tools is sort of evident now, I think. But also, that's really cool that, you started to recognize your worth and you've given our listeners sort of examples of how you did that. So, what I think we've gone through so far is sort of a mindset shift. Like, as you're learning these things and seeing your impact in the world and on your relationships, and you're learning how important you are, you had to have shifted perspective. You keep talking about how, like, when things are skewed,
Mhm.
so it seems like things were starting to become more clear. Can you describe the mindset shift you went through in order to create such a massive physical transformation? And what role did your mental state play into that?
I had to be that guy. I had to give myself tough love. I had to say, wake up, asshole. There's areas that you're defunct in. You need to wake up. You need to start focusing. You need to start prioritizing. I had to confront a lot of demons that were holding me in the state that I was at. And I just had to really get ugly with myself. That's not an easy process to be able to be that real and that raw with yourself.
Yeah.
You're usually trying to seek, how can I comfort myself? How can I, appease myself? How can I make myself feel good? But it's usually what's hiding in the dark that is what's going to really drive any change. But I know that I needed to do that because I deserved a lot more than what I was putting out. And I also know, like I said earlier, I needed to be around for my family. I really think though that you disrespect yourself more by not holding yourself accountable than by being ugly with yourself. And you're just going to keep going down those negative paths that you go down. You have to be willing to get in your own face to be able to confront those things. And it's going to be hard to stick to. You're going to want to try to slide back to what's comfortable, what makes you feel good. In my case, the food, that was my go-to. It was great to sit down with a bowl of ice cream and feel great about myself for that few minutes.
Hmm.
And it just doesn't work. And then another thing I'd like to tag on to that's really important is to find somebody that is going to hold you accountable. Whether it be a friend, a coworker, your neighbor, somebody that is going to also do that tough love for you. And if they know that you're slipping, if they know that you're in a bad place, to stay there and say, hey, stop what you're doing. You're fucking up here. You're not eating well. You're slipping down these bad paths again. You need to wake up and you need to do the things that you need to be doing.
Yeah. What's your relationship with food like today?
I still very much enjoy food. Okay.
Okay.
So that's not going to be something that's ever going to go away. I love food. Yesterday after competition, went and had scotch and tacos. That was a fantastic time.
Yeah.
But I've learned that once you get out of the toxic relationship with food, where it becomes a crutch as it was before, and once you start aligning those other goals and working hard and becoming your own support system, that you can still enjoy the food, but you can just have a good, healthy relationship with it.
Okay. And the healthy relationship with it looks like not eating for comfort, but eating to sustain your life, but still enjoying it when you eat it to sustain your life. Is that correct?
Right. And in the case of me now, it's eating 95% of the time to a good healthy plan. Eating the way I like to refer to it is eating for fuel,
Okay.
not for pleasure. But then if 95% of the time, if you're eating for fuel and not for pleasure, that 5% of the time, you can go out, you can have your pizza, you can have your cake, you can have your tacos like I had yesterday.
Hmm.
There were some really indulgent tacos, but you can have those, not feel a bit guilty about it because the toxicity in that relationship is not there.
Awesome.
Because let me ask you this: if somebody's in a place where they're eating for comfort
Hmm.
and they sit down and do what I did, need a whole large pizza in one sitting, how much are you really enjoying each bite of that?
I don't know. Like I do that. I eat for comfort sometimes. And when I do, exactly like you said, I enjoy it in the moment. And then as soon as it's over, I'm like, oh, why did I do that? It's not good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when the relationship improves and you have a situation like I had last night, I was doing it. I was also celebrating a victory.
Hmm.
It was two fights yesterday, won both by submission and took home the gold.
Yeah.
So, and I was there with about a dozen or so friends, and it was a time to celebrate. It was a time to have fun,
Yeah.
and had both of my daughters with me as well. And it was a great time. Enjoyed every moment of it, and
Awesome.
I was able to walk away from there with a full belly, probably a little fuller than I needed, but
Hmm.
I didn't feel guilty about it
Yeah.
because everything else was aligned. And I also walked away fulfilled as well emotionally because of the day's victory, the time spent with my daughters, the time being around people in that environment that was just absolutely incredible.
So for someone who's not aligned, can you explain how today you're not going to go back and eat those same tacos? How do you keep yourself from doing that?
I would say a big part of it is the power of habit. If somebody is just getting started and they have a lot of weight to lose, you're not there yet. where you can start really divulging yourself into some of those behaviors that create that level of reward. You'll get there, but they say that it takes, there's some studies that say 21 days, there's some studies that say 6 weeks to build a habit. A lot of times, if you try to rush that too early, you end up saying, that felt good yesterday, I'm sure it'll feel good today. But once you create those habits, and there's so many good resources out there. There's a couple of books. I believe one's called The Power of Habit, another one called Atomic Habits. I would certainly look those books up. I've read snippets of both, and they're great information. But as you build those habits, it's easier to revert back to the habit instead of reverting back to the comfort.
Gotcha. That's a really good point. I haven't heard anybody put it that way, quite that directly about habits. So thank you for sharing that. That's really cool. Okay. So let's talk about how you got into some of the healthier habits. What did you actually like? What are the tangible steps you took to make the physical changes?
The first step happened around the same time as my wake up call when I went to the doctor and my blood pressure was just way the hell off.
Mhm.
That at that level is the level where even at my age, I was 35 at the time. That's the type of blood pressure you stay that long consistently. You're looking at stroke, cardiac arrest, lots of other very, very bad things that a 35-year-old doesn't need to be going through.
Mhm.
So having the wake up call to start putting things into a clearer picture was really kind of step 1A. Okay.
Mhm.
Because that didn't create any change yet, but that created my catalyst for the change.
Okay.
One of the first things I know I needed to do outside of the doctor saying, you're not leaving here today without a prescription for blood pressure medication. I also knew that the Adderall was one thing that was going to be causing some of the issue. Adderall's a stimulant. Stimulants direct relationship on blood pressure.
Mhm.
But I knew all along that the Adderall was masking that change or masking the underlying issues that I needed to change. How about that? The second thing was after that was starting to clean up my diet. So I went down the keto path for the largest part of my dietary changes.
Okay.
Once I started on that, I stuck to it religiously and noticed some very big results in a short amount of time. And as I started seeing those changes, I started becoming addicted to the success of those changes.
Okay.
When first week I lost like 10 pounds, a lot of water weight happens at first when you switch over to keto, but seeing that much of a change that quickly was certainly a driving force that allowed me to stay in that mindset. Okay, I've lost this much. How much can I do this week? Even if I didn't lose as much the next week, I still had enough of an avalanche started that
Mhm.
it kept me wanting to sort of stay down that path.
Yeah.
I did after I got 35, 40 pounds off, I did start doing some activity. I didn't do much at first. I couldn't do much at first. In hindsight, I wished I would have pushed myself to do a little more then,
Mhm.
but it did kind of help start to loosen up and move old joints and muscles that hadn't moved in quite a while. Did have did have a small knee injury at one point from doing some of the activity that derailed a bit of it, but I was able to recover from it pretty quickly. But still hadn't quite found that alignment of physical activity yet. But the diet still stayed true,
Mhm.
and in that amount of time, from just dropping the weight, I got off of the Adderall pretty quickly. Actually, within the first month, I told my doctor actually that day when he gave me the bad blood pressure reading, I don't want to be on this stuff anymore. I want to try to see if I can work on this mental state a bit more holistically instead of introducing the stimulant in my body. And he agreed that it would be good for me to try. Advised me to wean the dose off because it's not something that you want to stop cold turkey. It's a very addictive substance,
Mm.
and it was hard. Withdrawal symptoms were pretty bad,
Okay.
but I just fought through those, kept pouring myself back into the diet, and kind of second wind that I got off of the successes of it. Within 3 months, I was off of the blood pressure medication that he
Wow.
had put me on.
Okay.
And within 5 months, I was off the antidepressant.
Wow. That's amazing. Let's take a little side street into the withdrawal symptoms of Adderall for just a second. Can you describe what you went through with that?
So some of them were just very physical symptoms, probably some, and I've never been in this spot myself, but some of them similar to some of the hard drugs, being feeling physical malaise from not having that in me, shaking, body pains,
Okay.
headaches, nausea. It's just a very unpleasant experience. It shot my anxiety through the roof. It was not a pleasant time. It passed pretty quickly, but
Okay.
it was probably, like I said, I weaned myself off over a period of a month, probably 2.5 weeks of that was the most noticeable.
Okay.
The initial tapering, it didn't bother me that much, but once that dose started getting lower to non-existent is when I really started feeling that. But like I said, fortunately, it passed pretty quickly,
Yeah.
and I was able to maintain my focus, and that sort of helped keep me going through it.
Okay. And then one other follow-up question to this discussion is, so you started with keto. I know a lot of people who are trying to lose weight talk about how some of these, they call these fad diets and they say they're not sustainable. Did you eventually come off of the keto diet and just use that to make that initial progress, or is it something that you've modified and tried to sustain?
I still absolutely advocate for the keto diet. But that being said, with the level of activity that I do now, it doesn't give me the fuel that I need at the moment
Okay.
to sustain my level of activity. So I eat I call it just a mostly clean diet, but I have to have the carbs in my diet now for the amount of training that I do. And we'll go into that in a little bit, I'm sure.
Hmm.
But I was doing it at first, and I just didn't quite have the energy that I needed to sustain myself.
Okay. So it's safe to say that you can modify your diet based on what your body needs as you go through this journey.
Right.
Okay.
But again, back to what we talked about earlier, one thing that keto did well for me was solidifying that concept of habit.
Okay. Now we've talked a little bit about how you took home gold this past weekend. So you've definitely found a passion in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and you've been talking about how your activity levels need to be sustained. So how did that passion specifically help everything fall in line? And can you give us an idea of what your activity levels are now?
To step back from that just a little bit to where I got my start in it, I knew my physical activity, even though I had lost the weight, wasn't where it should be. I didn't have some of the aches and pains, and yeah, I could bend over to tie my shoe again,
Mhm.
but still knew I wasn't quite feeling what I should be doing. So this last summer, I started off doing a little bit of hiking. Thought, well, I'll start trying to do some activity here and there. So I started hiking. I went and did some small hikes, couple miles, fairly flat, nothing too extreme. Well, then on, I want to say it was July 21st of 2020, I recruited a friend of mine to go hiking with me. So at Table Rock State Park here in upstate South Carolina, there was a trail that I did back when I was in high school. It's known as the Pinnacle Mountain Trail. It's 4.3 miles one way and a very, very tough trail.
Okay.
I had not done that since, I was in 10th grade when I did that last. It was also something that I had resigned myself to. I'll never be able to do this again when I was at my heaviest.
Okay.
And so it was always kind of this thing that was looming over me that I know I'd never be able to do that. But as I hiked the small trails and started thinking more about it, it's like, what the hell? Let's go for it. So I called up my friend Chris and I said, "Hey, I want to do this trail." I knew Chris would be in for it. Chris was pretty recently out of the Navy, very into fitness, and his response was, "Hell yeah, bro, let's go do it." This was like 21st of July. I think it was the hottest day of the month.
Oh God. Yeah.
It was a terrible day to choose to do it, So we got started at 7 o'clock that morning, and we took the whole trail, went up to the summit, made it back. Total time was, I want to say, about 5.5, almost 6 hours for the round trip, if I recall. But I kind of found something that day. I hadn't done any activity anywhere close to that point, but I found out that I was able to do a lot more than I thought I could.
Mm.
Now, I also wasn't all that smart that day either. I didn't hydrate well.
Okay.
So I got home. I knew I was partially dehydrated. I was laying in my bed because pretty much all I did was walk in the door, crawl into the shower, clean up, lay in bed. And as I was laying there trying to hydrate, not feeling well at all, I still had a sense of victory for that day. But kind of got put on my ass after that because the lack of hydration forced a dormant kidney stone to start moving.
Oh no.
And so I spent the next 2 weeks as that kidney stone very, very slowly passed its way through. So I should have hydrated better. I'm glad I'm rid of it, but
Yeah.
I should have definitely hydrated better that day.
Yeah.
And again, picking the hottest damn day of the month was probably not a great choice either.
Yeah. But you had the motivation.
I did. And so that kind of set something off that day. And then 2.5 weeks, couldn't really do much else because of the kidney stone.
Mhm.
But I knew, okay, I can do more. I didn't know what yet. But on a Wednesday, I was going into Walmart to grab some groceries and a few other things.
Mhm.
And I ran into somebody I hadn't talked to in a while. So back 6, 7 years ago, before I really started my downward path, me and my youngest daughter did karate for a little while at a local gym.
Mhm.
She started doing it. I did it as a thing to do with her. I really enjoyed it, but made a lot of great friends in that. And one of those friends I ran into on the way to Walmart.
Okay.
It's like, hey, did you hear? We're starting up a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program out at the gym. You should come check it out. And I was like, okay. So I thought about it. And I also started at the same time doing the karate a little bit again, too. I did usually karate like a night a week, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu a couple nights a week then, but I really started developing more of the passion for the Jiu-Jitsu than the karate.
Okay.
And I really wanted to focus. So I stepped back from the karate, went full time into the Jiu-Jitsu. And I've really missed that type of, grappling and combative sport. I hadn't had anything like it since wrestling in high school,
Mhm.
which was, a huge passion of mine back in high school. So I decided to check it out. And very first day of practice for jiu-jitsu, you know, I had not done much activity at all outside of the hiking and my one big hike. So I was extremely out of shape. Okay. I was lighter, but I was extremely out of shape. So I hung in there for the whole practice. We lined up at the end of practice like we always do. Couldn't stand up straight. Everybody else there was, stood up as we were listening to our coach give us kind of a, end of the class rundown as we always do. And I was sitting there, hands on my knees. I couldn't stand up without getting dizzy. So I finished. I sat down for a little bit, practically had to crawl out to my car. Uh, and then got home. Fortunately, I only live about half a mile away from the gym.
Okay.
And that feeling where you're exhausted and you pull up at the house and you just sit there in the car, don't want to get out. You don't want to go in yet. You just want to sit there and then just enjoy that quiet.
Mhm.
Well, that was me for about 10 minutes. So I sat there until I mustered enough strength to be able to get out of the car. I decided it was too much effort to bring my gym bag in that night. So I just let it sit in the car, got inside, took a shower, ate something. And as I laid there in the bed after that, my muscles just, jackhammering from the muscle exhaustion.
Mhm.
I had a smile on my face. I knew I'd found something that I hadn't had in a long time. And I just kept going back. Now, those few weeks, I was absolutely miserable after every practice, miserable for days.
Mhm.
I was only at the time doing it on Mondays and Fridays. So I was getting a good little rest.
Mhm.
but I knew I'd found something that was missing in my life, something that I needed. That did force me after that to sort of change the diet a little bit. I knew that part of it may have been from not having the energy because of eating keto
Mhm.
and not having the carb intake. So I adjusted, I cleaned up to try to find what fueled me properly. And as I adjusted that and started doing it more, that part did get better. I did that level of activity. I started back in, so that had been about mid August
Okay.
that I started doing that. Around end of September, I decided, 2 days a week of this isn't enough. I want to start doing it more. I want to start, honing in and doing this practice better. Ever since I've stepped into it, it's not at all with the mindset that I want to be the best. I want to be a world champion or anything like that.
Mhm.
Let's face it, I'm 36 years old. Now, there are age brackets for that, but for me, it's about working on what's inside. And while I do some level of competition, I go for the competition for the fun of it, to see how my training has progressed, and also to once again push those mental boundaries of what I can and can't do. For example, in fight yesterday, my second fight of the afternoon, I'm not gonna lie to you, I was a little intimidated.
Okay.
I'm 6 foot two. The second guy that I went against was probably all of 6'10".
Whew.
Yeah, I was intimidated, not gonna lie, but I won. Fought hard and I won.
Yeah.
I walked away from that with another one of those mental victories. Wow, I can do more than I thought I could.
Mhm.
So yeah, I started going more. Started most days of the week. So the school that I train at, Forge Family Martial Arts in Williamson, work there with my coach Nick on Mondays and Fridays. Nick trains at a school, Electric City Mixed Martial Arts in Anderson, South Carolina. So I started going out there to where he trains at, working with them on most Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So a typical week for me is 4 days of jujitsu, sometimes weekend practices. If I have the time, if me and my kids aren't doing anything, sometimes there's some open mats here or there where we'll go and get to roll with some people that we don't normally get to. I've also thrown in out at Electric City Mixed Martial Arts. They do a CrossFit type program. I try to now do that also a couple days a week,
Okay.
which is a whole level of activity in itself.
Yeah.
And I've also taken up doing some running,
Wow.
and I'd like to hopefully before the end of this year possibly do a couple of 5Ks and maybe even do like a Spartan race.
Okay. So a lot of activity. I would love to know if your journey with your physical activity and your health has helped in your career in any way.
It has, and stepping that back to other changes that it's created, my confidence is much higher than it used to be. My self image is better than it used to be. Generating a goal driven perspective from it. Those three things alone have definitely helped me with my career.
Okay. You just named some really important things that it's helped with, but how has this journey helped you get to know yourself better? Earlier, you said some things about working on the inside and things like that. What have you learned?
I've learned that again, like I touched on earlier, that I can do a whole hell of a lot more than I think I can. A gentleman by the name of David Goggins, if you've ever heard of him,
Mm-mm.
he cites a 40% rule that a lot of people are usually only ever capable of giving 40% of what they're really capable of. And I've found, and this is in all areas, in the physical activity, in self care, in my relationships, in my career, that there's an upward bounds that I was nowhere near touching,
Okay.
and that tapping into that, I've been able to really start to build things I never thought I could.
Okay. So, would you consider this lesson like you finding yourself?
In a way, it's certainly an aspect of that.
Okay.
There's a few other things I would say that could factor into that, but finding what I'm capable of, or at least finding more things that I'm capable of, has been really a catalyst to help me want to try to find more things that I'm capable of.
Okay, that makes sense. So, in that sense, I was going to ask you, do you think we ever stop finding ourselves as humans? But I feel like you're going to say, no, we don't, because there are always more things you can find that you're capable of. What would you say to that?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. There's always more, more gas in the tank. We end up leaving, so much of our potential on the table that we don't ever really tap into that. I think too, something that's really important to think of is we're always going to have some kind of stressors in our lives. That's not going to go away.
Mhm,
One of my favorite authors is a gentleman by the name of Mark Manson.
mhm.
Really big fan of his work, but he says in one of his books, he says, don't hope for a life without problems. There's no such thing. Instead, hope for a life of good problems. And a lot of that is just taking those circumstances and changing them and molding them into something that you can work with. He has another quote that I'll paraphrase here because I don't remember the exact words, but he said, that essentially that life is a shit sandwich. Find the shit you can tolerate,
The one that tastes the best?
right? So yeah, instead of trying to focus on fixing all of our problems, though, I think the biggest thing for us is going to try to find what we're made out of instead of trying to make things that we can't control into something else.
Mm,
There's a saying that says the same boiling water that softens the potato hardens the egg.
mhm,
It's not
mhm,
about the circumstance, but rather about what you're made of.
mm.
Everybody's going to have those types of things in their life. It's about taking them and turning them into what works for you.
Yeah, very good point. Okay, so let's contrast your self-care routine from before you started this weight loss journey to now. How would you describe your self-care routine?
For one, I take care of myself better now. Not just the fitness side of it that we'll get into in a second, but better grooming, do things like go to a barber more regularly,
Okay.
focus on how I dress a little bit better. And that was one of the last things really to come into alignment for me. But I think now the wanting to take care of my appearance is a physical manifestation of the changes that have happened on the inside. As I've
Mhm.
aligned myself internally, springing forth into my appearance physically, and I'm trying to finally reconcile the two. Also, in my self care, like I said, jujitsu, CrossFit, running now. I do a lot more physical activity than I used to, and really enjoying that along the way.
Mhm.
Through the jujitsu, I've made friendships that I can absolutely tell are going to be friendships for lifetime. And having those close knit friendships is something as well that is irreplaceable for somebody that's never been as well involved in any of combative sports or martial arts. The bonds there are just, indescribable. One thing that I would say is a part of it. We get out there on the mat each day. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is in part about submitting your opponent, whether that be through chokes or joint locks or a few other items, but we're literally taking each other's lives in our hands. You put somebody in a blood choke, their life is in your hands there. And so respecting and trusting, when somebody taps out, it creates a bond that you can't describe, knowing that, hey, I just had this person's life in my hand, but this person is my friend. I love this person. I want them to show back up tomorrow unhurt
Yeah.
so we can train and do it again. I make the joke all the time that, I'm going to choke my friends in a padded room today. And it's what we do,
Yeah.
but there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But reading, I read a lot more than I used to, and just, work on my self improvement from from that standpoint of learning and knowing me. I try to take each day as well with just a very simple approach. I try to go to bed each day knowing that there's something that I did to make myself a better person that day. Now, am I successful on that every day? No. Most days, yeah, but every day, no. And if I go to bed and I haven't improved somewhere, I don't let that discourage me. I just wake the hell back up the next day, do it again,
Mhm.
and try to figure out something's better, whether it be in a relationship, whether it be my jiu-jitsu, whether it be, something with my daughters, whether it be in my career. Just find some little piece each day to make myself better. The saying, how do you eat a whole elephant?
Mhm.
One bite at a time.
Yep.
You have to break down, you have to celebrate. You have to celebrate the small wins, and you have to enjoy the spaces in between all of the big moments to really understand the small and simple joys in life. From an anime that I just finished, there's a quote that says, "You should enjoy the little detours to the fullest because that's where you'll find the things more important than what you want."
Mm. Did you post that recently? I feel like I've
I did.
seen that. Okay. I
I
just
did.
saw it.
I did. I just finished that anime like 2 or 3 days ago, and it definitely drove home a lot of the things that I had going on.
Mhm.
And another thing for self-care, one thing I wasn't realizing that I didn't allow myself for before was I'm really an introvert myself, maybe an ambivert to some extent. I also know and understand when I need those days now where I need to recharge,
Mhm.
where I can be outgoing, I can do jujitsu, I can do the activities, but there may be a day where I just want to sit there and binge Netflix
Mhm.
or something like that, and that's perfectly okay. I didn't respect that need before when it had arisen
Okay.
because I was in a position where I had to try to be focused on other things. I didn't allow myself the time or the space just to decompress and have those days. And now that I understand them and I know when they're coming on, I can allow for them. I can decompress and I can move forward a lot more composed than I was prior.
That makes sense. I'm glad you brought that up. That's a big one.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, what's your best advice for someone who may be struggling to lose weight or just make a change in general?
I touched about this earlier, but you know, not being afraid to get ugly with yourself. Okay. It's okay and it's not damaging to yourself, to walk in there in front of the mirror and say, "Hey, motherfucker, you need to wake up. You're going an unsustainable path. You can't be doing this to yourself anymore. You have to look past what's comfortable. You have to look past what makes you feel good, and you need to you need to be able to start holding yourself accountable." And and like I said, you're disrespecting yourself more by not being real and not being true with yourself.
Mhm.
Also, as I've found with the jiu-jitsu is find an active passion. Okay. And by active passion, I mean, something that is it's gonna get you off of your ass and it's gonna get you doing something.
Mhm.
Now, if you have a passion for, somebody has a passion for knitting or doing puzzles or something like that, that's great. Any kind of passion is good for the mental well-being. But in the context of what we're talking about here, as far as weight loss goes,
Mhm.
those are great, but they're not going to necessarily help you lose weight. And not everybody's going to have an active passion. That's okay. But if you can try to find one, get out and try some new things.
Mhm.
I know a couple of people that didn't really have any active passion. They found things like kayaking. That's really great physical activity, really peaceful activity, gets you out on the water, gets you moving around. It's great workout, especially for the upper body. But just try to find something and to see if it's something that you can enjoy and something that works within your lifestyle.
Mhm.
Also, when it comes to diet, don't wing it.
Okay.
Plan ahead. There's a saying that abs are made in the kitchen, not in the gym. Full honesty, I'm quite a ways away from abs. I'm not even going to pretend there, but that quote definitely goes into a lot more. Maybe we're not talking about abs. Maybe we're talking about, in my case, performance.
Mm.
I know that when I eat better, I train better. And when I train better, I feel better about myself. And so that creates a catalyst that allows me to stick to that. And, try as well, to get others involved in what you're doing. For my particular case, I've got a gym full of people that that I work out with,
Mhm.
and they're along with this on me. I have my daughters as well to support me on it. They were at the tournament with me yesterday, and they had an absolute blast. Not only being part of that there for me, but also those same people that I've developed great relationships with, my daughters have as well, and they're absolutely part of the team when they're there, which is huge.
Yeah.
But you may not be into combative sports, and that's fine. But even if it's just getting out and walking,
Mhm.
you know, grab your neighbor, grab your dog, you know, call up your best friend, go for a walk a few days a week,
Yeah.
do something.
Hey, has COVID impacted or like put a damper on this for you in any way?
It's definitely an odd time to get into the sport. I will say that there have been some precautions. There have been a few COVID cases that have popped up at the gym. Usually, when that happens, we'll have to close quarantine for a bit before we get back into it. For me, while I understand the risks of doing it right now with COVID, from my personal take, it's definitely not doing it is a riskier thing for me
Mhm.
to fall back into a lot more negative mind spaces
Yeah.
that I would be in if I didn't have these activities and this presence in my life.
Mhm. That's an interesting thing you've just said. I've had other guests who have come on to talk about physical transformation, and it's, during COVID, and they've got the same sentiment, that it's riskier not to do some of these things. So, yeah, that makes sense. All right. So, just one more thing. Do you recommend any apps or resources to help on a journey like this that you've used that have been great?
Yeah, I've put together a few things here.
Okay.
I spoke about Mark Manson earlier.
Hmm.
Pretty much any of his material is fantastic. Definitely recommend his book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Okay.
That one has absolutely changed my life. Have you read that one yourself?
I have not read it yet, but it's on the list. It is.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah.
The book Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins.
Okay.
So David Goggins is a gentleman from a very rough upbringing who decided that he wanted to, as he quotes, be uncommon amongst uncommon people. So we're talking about a guy who was in the Navy SEALs, not only the Navy SEALs, but went through 3 hell weeks, went through BUDS training, also went through quite a few other military special forces training. He's run ultra marathons. He broke the pull up record for the most pull ups in I think it was a 24-hour period. I think it was something ridiculous like 4,300 pull ups
Oh my God.
in a 24-hour period.
Okay.
And while I can almost say probably nobody listening to this is going to go to quite those extremes, because that's the extremes of the extremes. It still, again, you know, lets you understand that there's more fuel in the tank than we realize.
Hmm.
And that's absolutely what I took away from that. So can't recommend that book enough. Another book by a guy named Dr. Robert Glover, No More Mr. Nice Guy. That one, I didn't talk about this a lot, but myself being of the fixer mentality, if there's an issue, I kind of have that. I want to be the nice guy. I want to fix it. I want to help.
Hmm.
That's not always the best path to go down. So it's a great book, especially for us guys out there that maybe want to kind of tackle some of the underlying, issues in relationships and those in that interpersonal space that we want to work on. I highly recommend that book. Some various readings from some of the Stoics of old, like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca. So much of that practical information can be applied to our daily lives today. It's great for people that are looking into keto, maybe to try to kickstart or create a sustainable weight loss goal. I found a lot of information from a guy named Thomas DeLauer on YouTube. Got a lot of great information. Finding some sort of apps. If you're going to go like a keto route, I used one called Carb Manager.
Okay.
It was really good. If you're not going to go keto, maybe track calories at least. Something like MyFitnessPal has a great calorie tracking program. On building up my running, I'm doing a program right now called Couch to 5K. Specifically, there's a few different apps out there that do it. I'm using one right now called 5K Runner. It works really good. Also in a space that you're obviously very familiar with. So many great podcasts and interviews out there, to listen to. I've listened to quite a few of yours that have been, really helpful. And then some of the other ones like Joe Rogan.
Mm-hmm.
There's one on YouTube called Impact Theory that's really good. And getting some of the guests on there, people like mentioned earlier, Mark Manson, David Goggins, also people like Mel Robbins, Jocko Willink, Jay Shetty. Some of those interviews are just absolutely awesome.
Well, thank you, Dustin, for that little
Yeah.
shout out there and all these great resources.
Absolutely.
Yeah, guys, these resources will all be in the show notes for you to go look at. So make sure you go take a look. And Dustin, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. And it was so great to see you today.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and learn more at humanamplified.com.